The crystal chandelier overhead cast fractured light across table 12 as Joyce Rolone balanced the tray of champagne flutes, each one worth more than her monthly rent. The Gilded Cell wasn't just a restaurant. It was where Manhattan's elite came to pretend their money didn't have blood on it. Her black uniform clung to her aching body after 9 hours without a break. The fabric stretched thin from too many wash cycles, just like her patience. Just like her hope. She moved through the dining room like a ghost, refilling water glasses for people who never looked up, clearing plates from conversations she wasn't supposed to hear. The tips tonight would barely cover the interest on what she owed Marco Vega, the loan shark whose text message burned in her pocket like a lit match. Tomorrow. No excuses. Or, I visit your daughter's school. Her hands trembled as she approached the private corner booth where he sat. Charles Hopkins. Everyone at the Gilded Cell knew him. The manager personally served his table. The chef prepared dishes that never appeared on the menu. And the staff whispered warnings. Don't stare. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't breathe too loud. He wasn't just feared, he was a storm wearing a suit. Tonight, 6 men surrounded his booth, their eyes scanning the room with predatory precision. Charles sat at the center, impossibly still, his tailored suit absorbing the dim light like it was made from shadows. His jaw was carved from stone, his dark eyes missing nothing. When he lifted his glass of scotch, the room seemed to hold its breath. Joyce was clearing the adjacent table when she noticed Marcus Chin, Charles's most trusted associate, shift his weight near the bar. A nervous gesture. Unnatural.
Wrong.
The air between them tightened. A waiter she'd never seen before approached with Charles's signature drink on a silver tray. But something flickered in Marcus's eyes as he watched. Something that made her pulse spike with recognition she didn't want to name. She'd seen that look before, in the eyes of people who'd already made their terrible choice. She glanced at the amber liquid in the glass and saw it, a barely perceptible shimmer on the surface, an oil-like distortion that didn't belong in $1,200 scotch. She never expected danger and destiny to meet in the same room. Time crystallized. The waiter was 3 steps from Charles's table. Marcus had already turned away. No one else saw. No one else would stop it. Joyce didn't think about her daughter.
She didn't think about the debt.
She didn't think about anything except the fact that the only man powerful enough to crush Marco Vega was about to die, and with him, any chance she had of surviving. Her feet moved before her brain caught up. She intercepted the tray with a desperate smile, her server's instinct providing cover. "Allow me," she said, her voice steadier than her hands. And then she drank the poison meant for Charles Hopkins in one burning gulp. This was the night everything changed for both of them. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Your support helps us in creating more amazing stories, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's continue with the story. The glass slipped from Joyce's fingers and shattered against the marble floor, the sound distant and hollow, like it was happening to someone else. Her throat burned with liquid fire, spreading through her chest like molten metal coursing through her veins. The room tilted violently, the chandelier above spinning into a vortex of fractured light. Her knees buckled. Before she hit the ground, iron arms caught her. Charles Hopkins moved with a kind of speed that shouldn't have been possible for a man his size, crossing the distance between them in a heartbeat. He lowered her carefully, his face inches from hers, those dark eyes studying her with an intensity that made her forget, for one impossible moment, that she was dying. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. His eyes said everything. "Sir, what?" Marcus Chin started, his voice tight with false concern. Charles's head snapped toward him, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Not now." 2 words, delivered like a death sentence. Marcus went pale and stepped back into the shadows where he belonged. Charles looked down at Joyce again, his jaw set in grim determination. Her vision blurred at the edges, darkness creeping in like smoke. She tried to speak, to tell him about her daughter, about the thread in her pocket, but her tongue felt thick and useless. "You have no idea what you just saved me from." His voice was low, controlled, but something flickered beneath the surface, something that looked almost like wonder mixed with fury. He rose to his feet, Joyce cradled against his chest as if she weighed nothing. Ghost protocol.
Now.
The words triggered immediate chaos. His men moved with military precision, phones already at their ears, weapons drawn, forming a protective barrier around them. The other diners barely had time to register what was happening before the restaurant's lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. Emergency lighting bathed everything in crimson. Charles was already moving, striding through the kitchen with Joyce limp in his arms. Her head lolled against his shoulder, her breath coming in short, labored gasps. She could feel his heartbeat through his suit jacket, steady, controlled, refusing to match the panic that should have been there. "Stay with me," he commanded, his lips close to her ear. It wasn't a request. They burst through the service exit into the cold November night. 3 black SUVs waited, engines running, doors already open. Charles slid into the back of the middle vehicle, never releasing his grip on her. The convoy peeled away from the curb before the door even closed, tires screaming against wet asphalt. Through the tinted windows, the city blurred into streams of light and shadow. They took corners at impossible speeds, running red lights, cutting through alleys most people didn't know existed. Every shadow held a threat he couldn't ignore. Charles's hand pressed against her throat, checking her pulse. His other hand pulled out his phone. "Victor, I need you at the penthouse. 5 minutes. Bring everything." A pause. "Rare alkaloid poison. Unknown strain. And Victor? If she dies, you die." Joyce's eyes fluttered closed. The last thing she saw before the darkness claimed her was his face, that cold, controlled expression finally cracking, revealing something raw and almost human beneath. She felt seen, and that terrified her. Joyce woke to the sensation of drowning in silk. Her eyelids felt weighted with lead, her body floating in a haze between consciousness and oblivion. Every breath scraped against her raw throat like broken glass. When she finally forced her eyes open, the ceiling above her was coffered and painted in soft cream, illuminated by recessed lighting that seemed designed not to hurt. This wasn't a hospital. She turned her head, the movement sending a wave of nausea through her, and took in the room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Manhattan skyline, the city lights glittering like scattered diamonds 40 stories below. The bed beneath her was larger than her entire bedroom, wrapped in linens that probably cost more than her car. And 4 drips stood beside her, clear fluid flowing into her arm through a needle wrapped in medical tape. And in the leather chair beside the bed, perfectly still, sat Charles Hopkins. He looked exactly as he had in the restaurant, suit immaculate, posture flawless, expression carved from stone. But his eyes tracked her every movement with an intensity that made her heart rate spike on whatever monitor was hidden nearby. The room went quiet as their eyes locked. "You're awake." His voice was steady, matter-of-fact, as if women drank poison for him every day. Joyce tried to speak, but only managed a hoarse whisper. "Where?" "My penthouse. 40th floor, Midtown." He leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "You've been unconscious for 16 hours. 16 hours. Her daughter. Panic surged through her veins, stronger than any poison. She tried to sit up, but her body refused to cooperate. "Don't." The single word stopped her cold. "Your nervous system is still recovering. Movement will only make it worse. My daughter is safe." He said it with such absolute certainty that she almost believed him. Almost. "I had her moved to a secure location with around-the-clock protection. The neighbor who was watching her has been compensated generously for her silence." Joyce stared at him, trying to process the implications. He'd moved her child. Without asking. Without permission. Because he could. "The poison you ingested was derived from a rare South American plant." Charles continued as if discussing the weather. "Untraceable in standard toxicology reports. Fatal within 2 hours. Designed to mimic a heart attack in someone my age and build." He paused, and something dangerous flickered across his face. Whoever wanted me dead paid a fortune for it. How did you save you? He leaned back, his expression unreadable. I called in favors from people who don't grant favors. A chemist in Moscow, who owed me his life. A doctor in Rio, who prefers I don't remember where he used to work. His dark eyes pinned her in place. In my world, trust was currency, and betrayal was death. I just spent a considerable amount of both to keep you breathing. The weight of his words settled over her like a physical thing. She owed him now. Not money, something far more binding. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Charles stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced precision. He moved to the window, his silhouette framed against the city he controlled. You took a bullet meant for me. He didn't turn around. That makes you mine to protect. The door opened without a knock, and a man in his 50s entered carrying a leather medical bag that had seen better decades. His silver hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, his hands steady despite the tension radiating from Charles's presence. He moved to Joyce's bedside with the efficiency of someone who treated gunshot wounds in back alleys and asked no questions. Vitals are stabilizing. Victor, she assumed this was Victor, checked the 4-line and studied the monitor readings with clinical detachment. Liver enzymes elevated but dropping. Kidney function returning to normal range. He turned to Charles, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. She'll survive.
But she needs rest.
Minimum 72 hours before any significant movement. Charles gave a single nod. Victor gathered his supplies and left as quietly as he'd arrived, the door clicking shut with a finality that made Joyce acutely aware she was alone with the most dangerous man in New York. 72 hours. Charles returned to the chair beside her bed, settling into it like a king assuming his throne. You'll stay here, under my protection. It wasn't a question. I can't, Joyce started, her voice still rough. I need to get back to my daughter. I need to work. I have. Your shift at the Gilded Cell has been covered indefinitely. He spoke with the calm certainty of someone accustomed to reshaping reality to his preferences. Your apartment rent is paid through the end of the year. And Marco Vega, his expression hardened into something that might have been carved from obsidian, will never contact you again. The room seemed to tilt again, but this time it had nothing to do with poison. What did you do? What needed to be done? Charles leaned forward, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her forget to breathe. Your debt to him has been erased. Not paid, erased. Along with his memory of your name, your face, and your daughter's existence. He paused, and something almost like warmth flickered across his features. He's also reconsidering his career choices. I can be very persuasive. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from something she didn't want to name. Why are you doing this? The question came out smaller than she intended, vulnerable in a way that made her feel exposed. Charles was silent for a long moment, studying her with that unreadable expression that probably terrified boardrooms and rival families alike. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that pressed against her chest. Stay close. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and brushed a strand of hair from her face with surprising gentleness. I won't let anything happen to you. The promise hung in the air between them, solid as a contract signed in blood. Your daughter is in a brownstone in Brooklyn. Private security. The best schools nearby when she's ready. Medical care included. He withdrew his hand, but didn't look away. You saved my life, Joyce Rolone. That means something in my world. She felt seen, and that terrified her. Because men like Charles Hopkins didn't save people out of kindness. They collected debts. They owned what they protected. And as his gaze held hers with that dark, unwavering intensity, Joyce realized with crystalline clarity that she'd just traded one cage for another. The only difference was this cage had a view. On the morning of the third day, Joyce made her decision. Her legs still trembled when she stood, but the nausea had faded to a dull memory. The 4 had been removed yesterday, leaving only a small bruise on her inner arm. She'd showered in the marble bathroom that was larger than her living room, dressed in clothes that had appeared in the closet, her size, her style, acquired by someone who paid attention to details most people missed. Charles had left an hour ago, his security team taking positions in the hallway outside. This was her window. She made it to the penthouse elevator before she heard his voice. Going somewhere? Joyce froze, her finger hovering over the call button. She hadn't heard him return, hadn't heard the door open. But when she turned, Charles stood 20 feet away in the living area, his suit jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with scars that told stories she probably didn't want to know. He didn't move. He didn't have to. His eyes said everything. I need to see my daughter. She kept her voice steady, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Thank you for everything you've done, but I can't stay here anymore. Can't. He repeated the word like he was tasting something bitter. Or won't. Does it matter? Charles moved then, crossing the distance between them with deliberate slowness. Each step measured, controlled, predatory. He stopped close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. The air between them tightened. You drank poison meant for me, Joyce. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of an avalanche waiting to fall. That created a bond between us. A debt that goes both ways. He lifted his hand slowly, and she watched as his fingers came to rest gently against her throat, feeling her pulse jump beneath his touch. Your life is mine now. Not because I own you, but because I owe you. I don't want. What you want stopped mattering the moment Marcus Chin put that glass on the tray. The words should have sounded cruel, but somehow they came out almost tender. Whoever ordered the hit knows you intercepted it. They saw you collapse. They watched me carry you out. His thumb traced her racing pulse. You're a loose end now. And in my world, loose ends don't survive. The implications crashed over her like ice water. She'd been so focused on escaping one trap that she hadn't seen the larger cage closing around her. No one touches you. Charles's hand dropped from her throat, but he didn't step back. His proximity felt dangerous and irresistible. As long as you're with me, you're safe. The moment you walk out that door, you're exposed. And I can't protect what I can't reach. Joyce's breath caught. So, I'm a prisoner. You're protected, he corrected, and something flickered in his expression, something that looked almost like pain. There's a difference. Is there? Charles was quiet for a long moment, his gaze searching hers with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she didn't.
Couldn't.
Your daughter sees you this weekend, he said finally.
Here.
Under guard. Safe. He stepped back, giving her space she suddenly didn't want. That's not a cage, Joyce. That's survival. The elevator dinged softly behind her, doors opening to freedom she could no longer afford. She didn't get in. If you believe the powerful shouldn't prey on the desperate, hit subscribe. Loan sharks and manipulators won't. They sat in silence on the wraparound terrace as the sun set over Manhattan, painting the city in shades of amber and blood. Charles had brought her out here after dinner, a meal prepared by a chef who appeared and disappeared like a ghost, claiming the fresh air would help her recovery. But Joyce suspected he simply needed space that felt less confined than the walls inside. He stood at the railing, his back to her, hands in his pockets, shoulders carrying the weight of an empire she couldn't begin to understand. The wind ruffled his dark hair, and for a moment, he looked almost human. Why do you care so much? The question escaped before she could stop it. You've done more than enough. Saved my life, erased my debt, protected my daughter. Most people would call it even. Charles didn't turn around. I'm not most people. I've noticed. Joyce pulled the cashmere blanket tighter around her shoulders, another luxury that had simply appeared when the temperature dropped. But that's not an answer. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant sound of traffic 40 stories below. She thought he wouldn't respond, that she'd crossed some invisible line. Then his shoulders dropped almost imperceptibly, and he spoke. I had a sister. His voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. Elena. She was 12 years younger than me. I practically raised her after our father died. He finally turned, and the expression on his face made her chest tighten. When I was building my organization, I trusted the wrong person. My second in command. A man I considered a brother. Joyce's heart raced, not from fear, but from something she didn't want to name. He used Elena to get to me. Held her for 3 days while he negotiated with my enemies. Charles moved to the chair across from her, sitting forward with his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped. By the time I found her, it was too late. She was alive, but she was never the same. The trauma, he stopped, his jaw clenching. She took her own life 6 months later. Charles, Joyce whispered, but he shook his head. I don't trust anyone except you. The words hung in the air between them, raw and unexpected. You had every reason to let me die.
To look the other way.
To save yourself. Instead, you drank poison. His dark eyes met hers, and she saw something in them she'd never expected to find. Vulnerability. You didn't know me. Didn't know me anything. You just acted. No agenda. No calculation. Every time he stepped closer, her breath vanished. In my world, everyone wants something, Charles continued, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't name. Everyone has an angle. But you... He reached out slowly, his hand covering hers where it rested on the armrest. His touch was warm, solid, real. You're the first person in 15 years who show me that maybe, somewhere in the city, genuine humanity still exists. Joyce stared at their joined hands, her pulse thundering in her ears. She should pull away. Should maintain distance. Should remember that this man was dangerous, that his world consumed everything it touched. But she didn't move. I wasn't supposed to feel this, he said quietly, almost to himself. Neither was she. Charles disappeared into his office after their conversation on the terrace, leaving Joyce alone with her thoughts and the city lights that never stopped burning. She'd almost drifted off on the leather sofa when he returned, carrying a manila folder thick with documents and photographs. He didn't ask permission before sitting beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated that probably cost more than her monthly salary used to be. I need to show you something. He opened the folder on the coffee table, spreading out surveillance photos, financial documents, and what looked like intercepted communications. You deserve to know what you walked into. The first photograph showed a man in his 50s with silver hair and sharp features, standing outside what appeared to be a gallery opening. He wore a tailored suit and a smile that didn't reach his cold blue eyes. Silas Thorne. Charles's voice carried a weight that made the name sound like a curse. Art dealer, philanthropist, patron of the Metropolitan Opera. He pulled out another photo, this one of Silas shaking hands with the senator. Also the architect of the largest trafficking network on the eastern seaboard. Joyce's stomach turned.
He ordered the hit.
He orchestrated it. Charles corrected, his finger tracing connections on an organizational chart that looked like a spider's web. Silas doesn't pull triggers. He doesn't make threats. He simply arranges circumstances and lets chaos do his work. He pulled out a photo of the waiter from the gilded cell, the one who delivered the poison scotch. This man's daughter was kidnapped 3 weeks ago, returned unharmed after he agreed to one favor. No one could connect Silas to it. No evidence. No witnesses. Just a desperate father who did what he was told. Every shadow held a threat he couldn't ignore. Marcus Chen. Joyce asked, remembering the nervous associate. Was given a choice. Charles's expression darkened. His gambling debts erased in exchange for looking the other way at the right moment. He chose poorly. The way he said it suggested Marcus's poor choice had permanent consequences. Charles spread out financial documents, his finger tracing money flows through shell corporations and offshore accounts. The hit wasn't just about killing me. It was about destabilizing my entire operation. Silas has been positioning himself to absorb my territory for months. My death would have created a power vacuum, and he'd already bought off half my distribution network. So this is business. Joyce said quietly. This is war. Charles looked at her, and something dangerous flickered in his eyes. And you're caught in the middle of it. Silas knows you saved me. He knows I brought you here. In his world, That makes you leverage. Joyce's blood ran cold. My daughter is protected. He said it with absolute certainty, but she could see the tension in his jaw. But Silas is patient. He'll wait for us to make a mistake, to let our guard down for one moment. Charles closed the folder, his hand lingering on the photo of Silas Thorne. In his world, trust was currency, and betrayal was death. He's built an empire on exploiting the vulnerable and discarding the loyal. The weight of it settled over her like a shroud. She'd saved Charles's life, but in doing so, she'd painted a target on her own back. What do we do? She asked. Charles turned to her, and for the first time since she'd known him, something like respect crossed his features.
We.
You said my life is bound to yours now. Joyce met his gaze steadily. That goes both ways. A ghost of a smile touched his lips.
Yes.
It does. Comment, I stand for loyalty if you believe Silas Thorne's betrayal is the worst kind of evil. Joyce found the tablet in the study 3 days later, tucked inside a drawer with her name written on a note in Charles's precise handwriting. For when you need to see her. The secured video feed showed her daughter's room in the Brooklyn brownstone, Lena asleep in a bed that was probably more comfortable than any she'd ever known. A nightlight casting soft shadows across walls painted her favorite shade of lavender. Joyce sat curled in the leather chair by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the tablet balanced on her knees, watching her daughter breathe. Safe. Protected.
Alive.
The relief was so overwhelming it made her chest ache. She didn't hear Charles enter. Didn't realize he was there until his reflection appeared in the dark glass beside her own. She's beautiful. His voice was quiet, reverent even. She has your eyes. Joyce's throat tightened. I haven't seen her in 6 days. The longest we've ever been apart. She touched the screen gently, as if she could reach through it and brush Lena's dark hair back from her forehead. She must be so confused. She's been told you're working. Charles moved closer, and Joyce felt the air shift around him. That you're helping someone important and that you'll see her soon. My people chose a guardian who's patient, kind. Former elementary school teacher. You thought of everything. I had to. He stopped just behind her chair, close enough that she could feel his presence like a physical weight. After Elena, I swore I'd never let another innocent pay for my choices. The silent tension tone was overwhelming. Joyce set the tablet aside and stood, turning to face him. The movement brought them closer than she'd intended, close enough to see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the way his gaze dropped briefly to her lips before returning to her eyes. You've already done so much, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. More than I can ever repay. I don't want repayment. Charles lifted his hand slowly, his fingers hovering near her face, as if asking permission. When she didn't pull away, he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture achingly gentle. I want you safe. I want your daughter safe. I want. He stopped, his jaw clenching as if he'd caught himself about to say something he couldn't take back.
What?
Joyce's heart hammered against her ribs. What do you want? Their closeness felt dangerous and irresistible. Charles's hand moved from her hair to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with a tenderness that contradicted everything she knew about him. His dark eyes searched hers with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. Something I have no right to ask for. His voice dropped lower, rough with an emotion she recognized because she felt it too, that pull between them that had been building since the moment she'd drunk poison meant for him. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from wanting him closer. He leaned in, slow, deliberate, until she could feel his breath against her lips. Until the space between them became charged with something electric and inevitable. His other hand came to rest on her waist, firm but not demanding, giving her every opportunity to step away. She didn't. Tell me to stop, he whispered, his forehead nearly touching hers. Tell me this is a mistake, that I'm taking advantage, that you want me to walk away. Joyce's pulse raced in her throat. Every rational thought screamed that this was dangerous, that getting closer to Charles Hopkins was like dancing at the edge of a cliff. But her body didn't listen to logic. Her heart had stopped following rules the moment she'd intercepted that poison glass. "I can't," she breathed, and the confession felt like falling. Charles closed the distance between them, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was nothing like she'd expected. Not demanding or possessive, but almost reverent, as if she were something precious he was afraid of breaking. When he finally pulled back, his eyes held a vulnerability she'd never seen before. "You don't know what you've done to me," he said quietly. She was beginning to. The alarm sounded at 3 in the morning, a sharp, discordant tone that shattered the quiet of the penthouse. Joyce jolted awake in the guest room to find Charles already at her door, fully dressed, his expression carved from granite.
"Get dressed. Now."
He tossed her clothes, dark jeans, a black sweater, boots. "We have 10 minutes. Her hands shook as she changed, her mind racing through possibilities, each one worse than the last. When she emerged, Charles was in the living room surrounded by 4 of his men, all studying tablets and speaking in clipped, urgent tones. Confirmed breach at the secondary location. Traced back to an encrypted server. Thorne's signature all over it. Charles's jaw clenched as he looked up, and Joyce saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before.
Fear.
"There's a leak in my network." He said it without preamble, without softening the blow. "Someone fed Silas information about your daughter's location, the security protocols, shift changes." He pulled up a map on the main screen, reds, marking compromised positions. "He's been watching us. Waiting." Every shadow held a threat he couldn't ignore. "Lena," Joyce's voice cracked, "is already being moved. Different location, different team, people I trust with my life." Charles crossed to her, his hands gripping her shoulders. "But Silas knows you're here now.
He knows you matter to me.
And that makes you a target." Joyce finished, her fear crystallizing into something sharper, something focused. "So what do? We disappear. I have safe houses in."
"No."
The word came out stronger than she felt. Joyce pulled away from him, her mind working through the implications, the patterns she'd observed during her months at the gilded cell. Running just delays the inevitable. Silas won't stop. "You said he's patient, that he waits for mistakes." Charles's eyes narrowed. "What are you suggesting?" "I know the gilded cell better than anyone on your team." Joyce moved to the screen, studying the organizational chart Charles had shown her days ago. The layout, the security blind spots, the staff schedules, the private rooms where deals happen. She pointed to 3 names, associates of Silas who frequented the restaurant. "These men come in every Thursday. Same time, same table, same routine." "Absolutely not." Charles's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You're not using yourself as bait." "I'm not bait. I'm the key." Joyce turned to face him, and she saw his expression shift as he recognized the determination in her eyes. "Silas thinks I'm hiding, that I'm a liability you're protecting. But what if I go back? What if I return to work like nothing happened? He'll kill you the moment you step through that door. Not if he thinks he can use me to get to you." Joyce stepped closer, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I can draw out his associates. Get them to reveal their connection to him. You said there's no evidence linking Silas to anything, but what if we create evidence? What if we make his people expose themselves?" The room fell silent. Charles's men exchanged glances, and Joyce could see them processing the logic, the potential. "I want to be your shield," she told Charles, her voice quiet but firm. "The way you've been mine." Charles stared at her for a long moment, emotions warring across his face. Fury, fear, respect, something deeper he wouldn't name. "This is insane." "It's calculated," Joyce corrected. "And it's our best chance." His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "If anything happens to you, then you make sure Lena grows up safe." Joyce reached out, her fingers wrapping around his. "But nothing will happen, because you'll be watching. And I trust you." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither of them was ready to fully acknowledge. Finally, Charles nodded once. A reluctant acceptance. "We do this my way. My timeline. My control. Deal." Only people who believe Charles Hopkins is doing the right thing by protecting Joyce will like this video. Don't let the toxicators win. Joyce walked through the doors of the gilded cell on Thursday night wearing her old uniform, her hair pulled back the way it used to be, her smile practiced and professional. The manager's eyes widened when he saw her, but Charles's people had already handled the conversation. She'd been on medical leave. She was cleared to return, no questions asked. In her ear, a nearly invisible comm device carried Charles's voice. "I have eyes on you." 3 men positioned throughout the restaurant. "You're never alone." She took a breath and moved into the dining room, like she'd done 1,000 times before. But everything felt different now. Sharper. More dangerous. Table 12, Silas Thorne's associates were already seated. 3 men in expensive suits discussing shipping routes and distribution networks in voices just loud enough for the wire she wore to catch every word. Joyce approached with water glasses, her hands steady despite her hammering heart. "Good evening, gentlemen." She smiled, and one of them, the one Charles had identified as Silas's accountant, looked up with recognition that turned quickly to surprise. "You're the waitress who," he stopped, exchanged glances with his companions. "I've been away." Joyce filled their glasses, her voice light. "Medical leave. But I'm back now." She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. It's amazing what you overhear in a place like this when people forget you're listening. The trap was set. The bait was irresistible. Within 30 minutes, Silas's men made their move, a quiet invitation to discuss opportunities in the private wine cellar. Joyce descended the stairs with 2 of them flanking her, and she knew Charles was listening to every word, watching through the security feeds he'd hacked days ago. They offered her money. Then threats. Then, finally, desperate and exposed, they revealed everything: the poison network, Silas's offshore accounts, the identities of corrupted officials on his payroll. Joyce's wire caught it all. Charles's team moved with surgical precision. Federal agents, ones not on Silas's payroll, swept through the gilded cell's private rooms simultaneously, catching 4 of Silas's key operatives in a single coordinated strike. By the time Joyce emerged from the wine cellar with Charles's hand wrapped protectively around hers, Silas Thorne's empire was collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. They returned to the penthouse as dawn broke over Manhattan, painting the city in shades of gold and promise. Charles was silent during the ride, his jaw tight, his hand never leaving hers. The moment the door closed behind them, his control finally shattered. He pulled her close, his hands framing her face, his forehead pressing against hers. "You don't know what you've done to me." His voice was raw, stripped of its usual armor. "Watching you walk into that room, knowing I couldn't reach you if something went wrong." But nothing did. Joyce's hands came up to cover his. "We did it. Together. You're the only thing that calms me." Charles's eyes searched hers with an intensity that stole her breath. "In a world built on chaos and violence, you're the only peace I've ever known." Joyce felt tears prick her eyes, not from fear or relief, but from the overwhelming realization that somewhere between drinking poison and dismantling an empire, she'd fallen completely, irrevocably in love with the storm wearing a suit. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "Good." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, a promise sealed without words. "Because you're mine to protect. Always." In the shadows of his world, she was the only light he let in. And she'd never felt more at home. Subscribe right now so you don't miss the sequel to Joyce and Charles's story. Don't let your laziness keep you from the next chapter. If you can't stand people like the loan shark who abuse people's poverty, comment "No More Debt Trap" below.